Hi everyone, Lisa and Dan here from Fireside Strategic. We're on a mission to build a warmer, more human, and more profitable business world. In the Fireside Chat series, we're celebrating leaders that combine strategy and humanity to help build great organizations. Right now, we're excited to chat with Debbie Kemp, a Chief People Officer Advisor and former CPO at MediaCom. Debbie, thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. I'm so excited to be here.
Debbie, so we are fellow people lovers. We're all about the human issues in the business world. And I'm so curious, what is it like to be a chief people officer, especially during this time of such extreme change and how we are working?
It's been interesting, it's been exhilarating, and it's been challenging. I think probably the challenge is a good place to start. It is helping others understand how to interact with each other during times like we've had and continue to have a little bit of through the pandemic. I think the word empathy is probably top of mind to me, and also really starting to understand each other's when you're in conversation with them and their background. So that's on the challenging side. I think the exciting side is really it's an opportunity to really create an engaged workplace, and also an opportunity to develop leaders who may not have had the opportunity in a different environment to really step up and show their ability to lead. So it has been all of those. I think I think of what that experience has been over the last year.
Yeah, absolutely. And when it comes to engagement and development, and one of the huge changes in 2020 is that there's so much more remote work. So when it comes to leadership and engagement, I'm curious, isn't it a little trickier in this remote context? Like, how do you feel this new context has affected those variables?
I think for organizations who have been primarily in office organizations, it has been a real adjustment. And I happen to have been working with one of those organizations, and I think that it was easy to bring everyone together when you were in the office. So from an engagement or perspective enrollment, you could pull them all together and have a quick conversation, or again, schedule events where you've got your group of employees together with leaders. And when we did this change to remote work, it was, oh, how do we do this now? And fortunately, I think technology, we were in a situation where we embraced Microsoft Teams, and we were already having town halls, but we increased the number of those town halls, and we created other mechanisms for really engaging our employees. The managers, again, it was how do you have a stand-up meeting remotely? How do you really start having those types of conversations, which are different than when you're in the office and you're like, okay, everyone huddle over here at this at this desk or whatever, right? It really it was challenging. Again, I think from the at the beginning, and there was everyone else calls it the Zoom fatigue. I just say for us it was the Teams fatigue. It was like, do I need to be on Teams 24/7 is what it felt like. And I think the other piece of this that really we could hit on in a little bit, but I might as well dive into it for a couple minutes now, is the work environment was so different with each of our employees, right? We had single employees, young single employees who had roommates, right? And they're in this apartment with 3 or 5 other people, and they have to figure out how do they find their place where they can work from. We had others which had dual individuals, so both spouses need to be on a call, and again, space may not be perfect for that. So how do they find that space where they can actually be on all the time? And again, our families. So our parents who had young children or school-age children, and finding that balance with their spouse and their children to be able to, again, work in this remote environment. So we had and I feel like, our work cut out for us from a people perspective on how do we address all of this.
Something that really strikes me about the way that you're describing these challenges is that you seem very aware about every person's individual challenges, where they're coming from, what their financial situation, what their living situation is, how they feel, etc. Yet on the other hand, as a member of the C-suite, you have to be so aware of the business challenges, the big picture. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about what that's like as a CPO to have to take care of so many individuals who are so different while aligning that with the business incentives. That seems really hard.
Well, it is, but that's part of, I just look at it as part of the job, because the other aspect of that, which is how do you really care for the C-suite individuals as well, and ensure that they continue to be focused on the business and ensuring that that lens stays very much there. And I think we're very fortunate at MediaCom that we had a very single, that focus was on the business at all times. And we had daily meetings when we were in the pandemic situation with our exco every evening. And I'll pretend it was like, I don't know, 5:00. And it enabled us to really look at and go client by client. If it wasn't every day, it was at least once or twice a week, to ensure that we understood their situation and what their needs were or were not, right? Again, from a media perspective, and how we needed to adjust our approach in how we were supporting or working with them. So it never left our focus, or our priority was really on the business. And we tried to enable our employees to do what I'll call their day job, and not worry about the client in the same way that we were worrying about the client. So we kind of, we stepped up in that way to ensure that they had additional, I'd say, support.
Yeah, there's caring about employees, and then there's caring about customers and clients on a human level. And I think one of the things we were really struck by in interviewing about 60 or so C-suite leaders in 2020 was how much one's own humanity comes out when your customer's humanity comes out. Have you experienced that?
I did. It was, I'd say, even gained a closer relationship with some of our clients than I'd ever had exposure to prior. I mean, as a CPO, it was like the only time I really got too involved is if we had a nitty issue with treatment, and not that that wasn't real, but that would be really my experience with them. And I think what happened here is there were more conversations about what are we doing about X. And so there was a more, again, people exchange of conversations across with our clients, and how we were dealing with certain issues, or how they were dealing with certain things, or how we could work together better. I mean, all sorts of different interactions, again, across working with our clients. And, we had a couple of travel, clients, and, really went dark. And again, what did they need at that very moment, understanding they may not be, when you think about it, paying us like they were paying us, right? We were getting in the same way. So what else could we do to help them during a period of time, right? And so it was very, again, I'd say much more just closer interaction. And, watching our C-suite all were very, to your point, right? Very human, very, again, empathetic. They understood, they each had different situations at home, and they really brought themselves, again, to the office in that way, to the conversation.
Something that is so interesting about this time of pandemic is the line between work and home has blurred for all of us. And I'm sure as the person who's in charge of people, you were constantly playing that role of navigating people's work lives and their personal lives and seeing how that's changing.
Yes, that's probably the easiest thing. It is very, it has historically been a very sensitive topic to navigate and kind of play close to that line. And I think now it's much more common a conversation in, what are their needs and what can we do to help them, be successful. So if you're having a career development conversation today versus 2 years ago, you're taking into consideration their feelings, their needs, their home situation. I mean, they're, again, individuals are more comfortable talking about. And I think it's great prioritizing what their situation is as part of that development that they're looking for.
I love hearing the word feelings from a C-suite leader. It's something that traditionally we wouldn't hear often. And I'm curious, do you find that these feelings, these human moments are changing not just people's personal trajectories, but the strategy of the company?
I think, yes, I think that the employer value proposition, so that EVP piece is changing from being all about the company to being about the company and the employee. And so, yes, I think I think there's an aspect of that where we won't be successful as an organization if we're not taking into consideration of our employees' feelings and their needs. I mean, it's critically important because they're looking to us, right, to provide them with this opportunity at the end of the day for them to perform, right? And they need an environment that enables them to perform. And so we need to ensure that we give them that environment.
What are a few ways through your CPO career at a few different companies? I'm curious, what are some ways that you've helped create an environment like that? Because as Lisa points out, traditionally, there's so many reasons to keep our feelings and the rest of us separate from our work lives. We create that artificial boundary. So I'm curious, how have you created environments where people can cross that bridge?
Oh, I think it's challenging. I think a lot is with is ensuring that we're hiring. And I think it starts with that we've hired the talent, or I've hired the talent, leadership talent initially, who are going to enable their employees to talk to them about their feelings and their needs. So if we don't have the right leaders in place, and we can say managers, because not every manager is a leader, but I think that you need to have even managers in place that their employees can speak to them, and that they can have a conversation and be real, and can relate to. And so examples, I mean, I think, probably, Velocity was a build as a company, both organically and through M&A. And so in a lot of ways that was fairly, not that anything's easy, but I'd say easier, because that was from a start perspective, ensuring that we had individuals and hired individuals. The key there, from the CEO I worked with, Tom Bruno, was I want you to hire individuals that are hungry, humble, and smart. And so that I've kind of kept that with me throughout that time. But to me, it got to that, right? We wanted to hire people who could relate to each other. And we wanted them to be really, I mean, I'll say, to me, that hungry aspect is, they are driven, right? They really are, they know what good looks like, maybe even they know what great looks like. But they're humble about their approach to it. And to me, that humbleness is that they've got a good EQ too, right? They know how to relate to people.
And that can be such a rare combination, don't you think, Debbie, where sometimes, go ahead. Sorry, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say, it's not easy. Not everybody has, is balanced, right? I mean, I wish we all were balanced in that way, but I think that's, maybe that's another, another guidance that I received from a mentor, back in my Goldman days, which is, you've got to scale and you've got to figure out, again, kind of career-wise with people, they may be this today, or like, one way today and this way tomorrow. And you've got to figure out how to help them, again, from a career perspective, and a performance perspective, be a little more balanced.
when it comes to this issue of balance, one of the refrains that you sometimes hear is that IQ can't really be taught, but EQ can be. Do you agree with that? And if so, how can we teach it?
Teach IQ or EQ?
No, EQ.
Oh,
EQ.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think you can teach EQ.
Mm-hmm.
I'd say even at the same organization, we'll go back to velocity for a minute. We did bring in someone to work with us on kind of the bringing about a higher EQ organization. I think it was such a great program, and it really did help us. So I'm a believer that it can be taught. I don't think it can be self-taught. I think you do need, my belief is we need help with that. We need someone to point it out and to have conversation. And I don't, I don't know that everybody has a high EQ. And I think that is something that is very challenging, and I found challenging throughout my career, even the last, whether it was at even Bankrate or MediaCom. I think that good organizations, great people, but some individuals just don't have EQ. I mean, just they have low EQ, and it takes time to bring that up and to help them get that EQ that they need. And to me, it's like, I want them to be successful, whether they're at the organization or they leave the organization, right? Their next organization. And if we can help them create a much stronger EQ, then they'll be more successful the next time, right?
Absolutely spot on. So, we've been talking a lot about the individual, and what I'm really curious about is the team. So inevitably, not everyone's going to be balanced. Everyone's going to come with different personalities, with different skill sets, with different temperaments, with different EQ. What do you think, as the person that's running the whole organization, looking it down as a group, how do you balance that out in a kind of in this container of multiple individuals?
I think it's so important that we bring our difference. So no matter, we all have a different experience, a different background. I grew up in the Midwest. I happen to have always wanted to live in the East Coast, and with that, I brought my niceness, right? And but I was very driven and fast-paced and yada yada yada, right? So when I look across, organizations, I think what's key to me is always to ensure that everyone brings their difference to the table, brings who they are, and we'll just go back to use the word human, brings their piece to this, because then you're going to have a much more collaborative, innovative organization. And it really isn't that tough, but what's tough is to ensure that everyone feels comfortable being able to have those types of conversations, to be able to bring who they are. And I have to say, I believe that this, as awful as the pandemic has been, I think that opportunity for people to bring their difference has occurred in a way because they are remote and they're not sitting there face to face in the same way with other individuals. And so this is who I am, and you're going to have to take me for what I can do, right? I mean, and it opens up the door. So I don't know that I've ever been in an work environment in my past where I think it has been more acceptable and asked for is to bring that difference, right? People want to know who they're working with.
So love the way you put that, bring your difference. And I think you're right, the pandemic, because perhaps in part the boundaries between home and work life have broken down. We can all see into each other's living rooms. Let's stop pretending. Let's just be real. And you can't not be real when you see someone's living room,
Well, you can't. You'll appreciate. I was on an interview the other day, and the individual that was interviewing me, feeding the daughter in the bedroom. That's what they had. That's what they had. And I was like, I cannot imagine being where I am today, like 20 years ago, and doing that kind of an interview. Right? Like if somebody, I was laughing. I was like, it was human, right? It was awesome. But I think to your point, we are, we're in our rooms, and yes, some people, put up a screen right on the back or whatever. But it's who we are.
Yeah.
Bring it.
I love it. We so often think of technology as diminishing our humanity, diminishing our ability to relate to each other. But you've just pointed out technology can actually be a way to bring us together. It can be a way to bring out the humanity that might not otherwise come out.
Yeah, well, I think it does. And it's safety. I mean, I think that's part of it too, right? If we feel like we're in a safe environment, then we're more apt to bring ourselves to the conversation and to speak up in a meeting where we might not have, if we're around a table and everyone's got their laptops open, right? And half paying attention, we're just more apt to hide behind that. Again, not everybody, but many people are. Where now they're like, oh, well, what about? Or I thought I saw, or I read. You're just more apt to have to add to the conversation, which I think it's amazing. And I look forward to even, seeing that, more even in some of the in-person meetings.
I love that. Something that comes up when you were talking about opening up a space for people to bring their differences is that inevitably that will lead to more diversity of thought, more diversity of opinion. And what that results in is a better, stronger company, not just from people being happier, which they are, but also it shows up on the bottom line. You get a financially more successful business when you create an environment where diversity of thought is respected.
It does. And again, something that I think has been important, I'd say important to me since early in my career, but I think it is enabled to really come out more now, is that diversity of thought. And we know, we've all seen the studies and the results from many companies of how successful they are because they have that diversity of thought and diversity in general.
I love that. I would love to take a step back for 1 second and talk about you. You have such incredible empathy while having such sharp insight to the way that organizations and people work. Would love to hear a little bit more about your story and in particular, what inspired you to get into this field of chief people officing?
All right. Well, I'll try not to be very long in the story. I'll be brief. But as I mentioned, I grew up in Kansas City, or in Kansas, and I had always wanted to go to New York. And I think I thought it was this glorious life in this big city. And all my ask was from my mother was, can you please get a degree? Like, can you graduate from college? I'm supportive of wherever you go. And again, I think it was that time, and I'm very grateful that she had that foresight instead of me going off, at 17. So I'd say, had a fun ski trip, met a guy who said, hey, I live in New York, I work on Wall Street, you want to come visit? And I did. So that was my trip to New York, is how I got there. And I basically never left. I found the pace, and I had an opportunity to actually work at Goldman Sachs. And that was a non-traditional hire. And I think it was just because I just am who I am. I wish I could say it was like something big there. And they were looking for somebody at that time to help them build a new function, which is the mortgage research department. So, that was back in the day of, like CMOs, like those were invented back then. And they needed someone to help them build that. So they were like, oh, can you recruit? Well, I'd never recruited in my life, right? I hadn't. I'd been on the opposite end, right? Looking for a job, but not going out hiring other people. And I said, sure. I'm a yes, let me try, right? I can imagine failing ever. So I was out interviewing PhD candidates in some amazing programs across the US. And all I could think about is I have no idea what they're telling me about their dissertation. None. But are they a good person, right? Can I see them being successful? How could they relate? Would they be able to relate, help us build this department? That's what I hired. I mean, that's how I first recruited. And I was very successful. I'm going to tell you that these individuals are very successful today, if not retired, running their own, hedge funds. And so I think, that was kind of my foray into people. And then it just grew from there. And I had the opportunity. I was one of those hand raisers, or I'd have traders like tapping me on the shoulder. Hey, we want to go buy X. But we need you to go in and do the due diligence and tell us what we need to be doing, all this, right? And it was great because I got a lot of opportunities that way. So I can say, yes, I had a 20-year career at Goldman Sachs, but every 2 years I was doing something different because I was just all about learning. And the last bit was focused on M&A, and it was for the Goldman portfolio. And, opened office, closed office, and acquired many companies that, enabled us to learn, how to trade power better, energy better. And then that enabled me to pursue and kind of other M&A role with Avaya. And again, I think it just gave me more insight into a total kind of an overall HR role. So kind of that CPO journey. I never thought I would be a chief, human resource officer or a CPO, because I liked all those pieces, but my perspective was those individuals were probably not in touch with the real people who did the work. And that was, of course, my attitude at the time. Mm-hmm. And again, I'd worked for large organizations that those individuals were not very accessible, right? And the world has changed today. Everyone's very accessible. And those roles you have to be very agile in. And so that, led me to then take on or be hired, for CPO roles in younger, newer startup situations that were growing because they needed somebody who had done all aspects of the human capital. I call it's like a wheel, right? I mean, there's the whole life cycle of an employee, and I like it. So, and I like the challenges that it brings, and that means every day is a different day, and I like that. So I think that has led me to be that CPO and an advisor. I mean, I have individuals call me all the time. They're startup-ish, can't really pay, right? Which is fine, but how do I go about? How do I solve for?
Yeah. Variety feels like such a huge theme through your career. When we talk about diversity of opinion, you're walking the talk, right? You've been seeking it out, and you've been looking for all of these different sorts of organizations to help in so many different ways. You're like a walking poster woman for diversity of opinion.
Well, I've had the opportunity to also work globally. So I think that really, to me, then it just became part of my DNA. I just, whether I was in Pune or I was in Frankfurt, Germany, everybody, we all have a different culture and have different experiences and different values. And it's important to understand those systems and how we work together. So yeah, I do. I love it.
As we come towards the end of our time together, it's been a fascinating conversation with you, Debbie. Curious, beyond your roles career-wise, what do you do for fun when you're not working on sort of the human side of organizations? What's fun for you?
Well, I should tell you, I do own 2 high-end liquor stores. So I keep very busy with those as well. Which has been a fun venture for the last 6 years. And I'd say, again, in this pandemic, it's been very interesting since they are essential here in New Jersey. And the other thing I do for fun is I'm a big skier and snowboarder. So I love being outside, and I love being on the mountains.
I love it, Debbie. Your adventurous spirit comes through so much, both in your work and in your personal life. Thank you so much for joining us today. We had a blast. You are awesome. And we're really excited to see all of your CPO adventures continue.
Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure. Thank you.